I'm Alex Parsons and I'm the Democracy Lead at My Society. What I'm going to show you today is the range of registers of interest data that we publish and what different pages and publications are useful for. So TheyWorkForYou has, for the last 20 years, been building on the official parliamentary data, creating new analysis and ways of exploring the data. Our original reprocessing of the register of members' interest has been directly useful to journalists and researchers, but has also been part of the arguments for improving Parliament's own display and publication. A key thing we want to do with our work is lobbying by demonstration, where we show what's possible to give tools and arguments to reformers inside institutions to overcome obstacles to change. As Parliament's own display has improved, we've been thinking about what we can do next to add value to the data, either by making it easier to access or by adding new data and content. In the last year, as part of our Who Funds Them project, we've been working with volunteers to crowdsource new information about members' interests and to add more registers to what we cover. We're going to go through today some of the data products that have come out of that. So to start with, what are the registers of members' interest? So there are rules that require disclosure of representatives' external financial interests. These can be gifts, donations, shares, second jobs. The rules vary depending on the different parliaments, and in general we think these rules can be improved and tightened in various ways. Please see report on the previous slide. But this session is about the data that's actually been published. So we've converted the 4 registers into a common format for the different parliaments, which can then be read and displayed on TheyWorkForYou, and it's been flattened for different spreadsheet releases. The format is heavily based on the House of Commons format, which is the current gold standard, with specific fields to capture separate details like company names, country, and so on. All of the registers are mostly free text for each entry, with the exception of the House of Commons register. Something to remember when analysing this data is the overall data quality. So the data reflects what's being disclosed, and we have to remember some of the problems in that disclosure. First, that there's information that would be useful to understand that isn't covered by the rules, let's say if our thresholds are too high. Second, that information may be required to be released but just hasn't been, and no one has a way of verifying that. And third, that the information that may be released may be incorrect or self-contradictory. So for instance, we found on second job data, you sometimes get contradictory information about if employment is ongoing from different fields in some cases. So something to remember when you come to use these fields is to filter what you need to look at carefully and then have a look around to see if the results are good. The different parliaments are different categories and different disclosure requirements. We haven't comprehensively mapped the difference in the rules, but you will see if you switch to the Scottish Parliament data, more older data being kept around, many more voluntary positions being declared, and just generally longer free text entries describing. For Senef data, it's more clear than it is in other registers if the interest relates to the member or their spouse. So there is, depending on which set of data you're working with, have a proper look at what it looks like before diving into the analysis. Okay, so those disclaimers aside, I am going to switch to looking at TheyWorkForYou. So here's TheyWorkForYou.com. Up the top here, we've got the registers of interest page. This is sort of the hub page for all our registers data. So if there's something you're looking for, there will be a link to it from here. The first thing I'm going to show quickly is what we publish for each person. So for every representative on the site, you'll find a register of interest tab on their profile. Here's Keir Starmer's, and here's the example of this is the main entry. Here's some sub entries that relate to specific payments, and each of these sort of reflects a specific detail. On the left, you see the different categories that are covered in Starmer's entry. If someone was in multiple parliaments, and there are some people who are in the Scottish Parliament and also MPs, you get multiple registers here. For each entry we publish, you can see the history of that person's entry. This covers what has been added and removed from that entry over time. So here we can see details from a year ago dropping off as they pass the 1-year threshold, and new details being declared here. This is a mix of picking up substantive changes and formatting changes. Like this doesn't represent a real change, it represents Parliament changing its underlying data. So this is a useful sort of rough guide to things that may have gone away in the past if you try to investigate a historical lead, or just understanding what has recently been added that wasn't there previously if you're interested in a specific MP. Going back to the MPs page, all current MPs have a 2024 election donation register. This is something we worked with our volunteers on the Who Funds Them project. We've enriched a version of the September register from last year, looking at the donations and gifts received. We have created additional summaries based on the data that's available, tracking the source of donations from individuals, companies, other organizations, and also created more details about who the donors were, if they're available, and similarly for gifts, trying to track the source of these gifts. So this is a sort of a snapshot of what was declared related to the election, rated around the previous election, and can be useful just for understanding what the scene was like then. At the same time, this is also useful at helping what kind of support an institution supported MPs in the last election. So returning back to the Registers of Interest page, there is another section here that's new, interest by category. So here what we're doing is we're displaying the registers for each individual category in the register all together at once. So for instance, if we look at visits outside the UK, here is in the current register all MPs who have an interest in this area. We can expand the details to see more about it. And we can also select just new to restrict to just the ones who are new entries. So if you want to see for a specific category, just the things that have just been released, if you're interested in just gifts or just visits outside the UK, this page will show you what is new just to pay attention to at a glance. These registers exist for all of the 4 parliaments we have here. These say, but to take an example, looking at the Scottish Register, similarly overseas visits. This is what I mean by a longer full text description of what's happening here. So not the individual details you get in the Commons, but a full text description of what happened. So the other thing we publish overall is the highlighted interest page. This was another outcome of our Who Funds Them work, where we work with volunteers to try and flag MPs who's had interests in a number of different categories. So these were a country, if they received a gift or donation from a country's government that was scored not free in some way, the oil and gas industry and the gambling industry. This wasn't an exhaustive list, and we excluded rather than included borderline cases. So this page can show the information we found, common sources, when similar people were paying to different MPs, and just generally gives an overview of the kind of interest we found looking at these areas, which, as we hoped, wasn't lots of MPs, but it wasn't none. So we're hoping to build on this work, and if there's anything you specifically are looking at in these 3 areas or related to this, please get in touch. So what we'll look at next is the spreadsheet section. So we're now publishing a lot of spreadsheets because one of the things we want to do is make this data accessible with tools people already have. And so the low-hanging fruit here is publishing spreadsheets that people can do their own analysis in. We publish a few variants of this, so I want to show you through what's in several of these spreadsheets. So the simplest one we have is this Register of Interest 2024 spreadsheet. So if you click on this, you then get the option to download the Excel file, and this downloads takes a second to load. There we go. A spreadsheet of, since the start of the 2024 Parliament, all the interests that have been declared. And these squish all those details into one cell. And the reason that's useful is it means you can just do a text search in this column, and all the information you're looking for is likely to be there. So you're not going to miss something by it being in a cell you don't know about. So this is quite a basic, just squishing everything together and then letting you search it. But this is actually surprisingly useful given the unstructured nature of older data, and especially of just the... Yes, if you're looking for specific organizations, it is often easier to search in the one big column than it would be to look at how things have been split out. Okay, so to return to the big list, this next one we published, the one at the top, and this is a reformat of the CSVs that the House of Commons now releases. So this one, to load it, separates by each tab the category involved, which means the headers at the top reflect the details that have been shown before. So we've added our ID and the party, but the rest of this comes from the House of Commons data. So it's saying if the payment type was monetary, a description of the payment, and very useful if someone is the actual value of the money paid. So you can start to do queries, pulling things together, grouping things, adding titles automatically. So this is a big improvement to the data being collected by Parliament, and this is one of the ways it's getting out. So this is very useful if you're interested in specific kinds of work. If you're only interested in GIFs, one of these sheets will be the best one for that, as GIF category 3 is GIFs. So if you were interested in GIFs and hospitality, this sheet with all its fields will be incredibly useful for your analysis. So for instance, here we have some donor company identifiers. We found some problems with these, but it's generally more useful than not having them. And yes, so simply this is a useful thing. If you're looking at only one area of the interest, this will often be quite a useful way of exploring that data. So, final spreadsheet that is useful here is the All Registers database. And this is more of a database view on what we're publishing. So here we have, rather than lots of columns, we're just publishing the entries table, which contains the connection entry for each thing and the original summary, including this just to help it make it a bit easier to search through the stuff if you like. But also there's a details table which separates out all the details. So for instance, having this detailed name and the value of it. And this, if you're used to SQL style joins, this will be a useful way of exploring that data, because it's so for instance, for looking at countries visited, this one will show that all in one column, whereas those are spread over multiple columns in the House of Commons release. So if you're more comfortable with like database style joins, this will be a useful spreadsheet for you. Also, if you ever download any of this data, it's very useful if you fill out this form. It pops up a little thing on our Slack and it feels very nice to know people are using the data. So please tell us when you use the nice data. We'd like to hear about it. Okay, so returning to the TheyWorkForYou list. One of the things so that last sheet, we create 3 slimmed down versions of it for the Scottish Parliament, the Senate, and the Northern Ireland Assembly. All the data is in this one, but this is just if you just want one spreadsheet for these, that's the easiest way of getting that. We don't just publish the parliamentary registers of interest here. We've also recently started adding the Minister's Gift and Hospitality spreadsheet. So this is currently on gov.uk. The government's done some work to publish more of the gifts and hospitality disclosures in one place. The trouble is they've done it with lots of different CSV files, and so you have to add up a dozen CSV files, most of which are mostly blank each time. So we're just putting those together and republishing in one spreadsheet that will update when each time gov.uk updates. And I'll talk a bit more about this in a second, but that's useful if you're interested in government disclosures. So the only thing I haven't really talked about here is the historical spreadsheets. So there's a spreadsheet for the last Parliament and an ongoing Register of Members' Interest one since 2000, which is really just squishing all the data into that one column again. So it's messy in there, but if you're looking for information, there is lots of stuff, historical information to explore in that. So the next thing to talk about is if you don't want to use spreadsheets, but you do want to sort of share queries, something that can be useful is to create a query you can review, you can keep coming back to as the data is updated behind the scenes. And the easiest way to do that is using Datasette. This is a lovely little tool that makes it easy to parse and query data and share links. If you're looking to publish information, it's a pretty good for a little amount of work solution, having a data interface. So for flexibility, we're using Datasette Lite, which runs entirely in your browser. And so for any of these datasets, we'll take the Minister's Gifts and Hospitality one. If you click the Explore Data in Dataset, this page will load. It takes slightly more time than I'd like for a live demo. There we go, everything's fine. So we go to the Government Gifts Register here, and this shows us that same spreadsheet again, but in every web interface where we can start adding queries. So if we're looking at this, one thing we can see is there's lots of nil returns here. They're less interesting to us. So if we first set by 0 here, that means just the ones that don't have nil returns. And then let's look at just ones who are received rather than given by the government. And then if we want to say pick out David Lammy's interests, we can take his name back up the top and add that in the minister column here. And now we have a sheet just of the gifts received by David Lammy as Foreign Minister. So if we take this, this URL at the top is then shareable. It is the same thing as the query. So if you open up a new tab, put that there, give it a second, you get the same query again. So you can save that query and you can reuse the information. And you can share it with colleagues or just keep it stashed if you want to come back and see what it's doing in a few months. So that is the nice thing about Datasette. It's a nice way of exploring the data. Just going back to here we go. And I've got some examples here of using the actual register to have a look at things. So for instance, if we look at gifts from the lawn tennis club, we will simply load in up the same register and it will show us here are ones where the free text contains the lawn tennis club. And that's the easiest way of checking if something is in one of these boxes. So this tells us registers. I actually checked this earlier, so there's actually none in the latest register, but some of them have continued to be declared from previously. So again, and this query will stay working. It will change as the data is updated over time. The details of this will change. So if you have a specific company you're interested in or a specific set of companies, you can create a query here. If you're comfortable, you can create an SQL query directly, and then just keep coming back to this page. So it's a nice way of sharing links and storing the data. The final thing is we've also published the raw data that's available. So this is the JSON format that we rework all the registers into, and so they all work to a common format. You can click around and explore this format if you like, but basically it has a number of useful features in terms of being able to add annotations and being able to flag where we've added new details ourselves and that didn't come from Parliament. So it's a data format that is flexible enough to cover all the information from the different parliaments and is also flexible enough for us to use to annotate and add new information over the top. So like our enhanced registers and the highlighted interests use the same data format behind the scenes. So if you're looking to take registers and interests, annotate it, build on it, this file format might be interesting to you. We have a Python library, mysoc validator, that has helper tools for using that data, but please just get in touch if there's anything you want to know about building on that data or building in general, building on our raw data. So this updates every night if there's new information, so it should be up to date at any given time. Cool, I think that is the end of the data I have to show you. So please get in touch with me if you have any questions about the data we're currently publishing, things we do to tweak this data set to make it more useful to you. But thank you very much.